I'm Andrea. I work at SAP Hybris. We do microservices. Yay. That's why I'm here. And my topic today is a rather fluffy unicorn-style kind of topic. It's about making APIs prettier. Because basically, it's all about look at your APIs as a user interface. Because that's what it is. Developers are users, and an API is an interface. So we came up with these 9 guidelines to make your APIs better than ever before. Step number 1. And I really did copy. I talked to our UX people and I asked them, what are your 9 principles to make awesome graphical user interfaces? And they are totally applicable to APIs, which I found rather amazing. First of all, start with a really good idea, because if you have a nice API for something that is totally useless, you will still not make anyone happy and nobody will use it ever. And don't be afraid to throw things away. If you get feedback that amazing API, but I really don't need it, throw it away. It's tough. Microservices make it easier because there's not so much work they put right to them. Number 1. Number 2, match your system to the real world. Easy, everybody knows the real world. So if you talk about things, use words that normal people understand in your APIs. We use domain-driven design, which comes in very handy, especially this agree on a shared vocabulary thing. Because then you know that your vocabulary that you use as a developer is the same like the business people use it. If you have something that doesn't really exist in the real world, use metaphors. Like my laptop, it doesn't really have files and folders in it, right? But we always use files and folders when we refer to data that's stored there in a structured way. Number 3, don't reinvent the wheel. Very, very important. Follow de facto standards. There's so many people that already wrote APIs, and some of them are good. Look at the good ones. Look at the guidelines that other people already wrote. And just do the same. You might think you're smarter. I definitely do. But it's usually you're not. There's so many people that thought a lot about what they want to do. And then it happens really, really often that we think, it would be much cooler if you would do it like that, because this is so much more elegant and it's more logical. But if the rest of the world does it differently, that's not a good idea to do. Because people would look at your API and they will be confused. They're like, why do you do it like that? Everyone else is doing it differently. And you say, because it's more elegant. That doesn't really help them to get started with your APIs quickly. And one thing that we do to help others to not reinvent the wheel is we have a library of patterns and schemas and traits that we share publicly. So if you want to know how we do paging should always be done in the same way, or filtering should be done in the same way, or a lot of things like that. Error schemas should be done in the same way. We made that an open-sourced library, which also helps a lot with internal consistency. So don't only do it like the rest of the world, also internally with all of the APIs that you have, try to always follow the same patterns. It should always work the same way. You shouldn't make your users think about how to use your API. It should be super straightforward. It's like, it works like that. In this API, it works exactly the same way in this API. Another important thing is here, have naming guidelines. And this internal consistency for us is rather challenging because we have approximately 100 developers working on APIs and it should all look the same. If you would write it on a wiki page, it wouldn't work. Also important, prevent errors. My favorite example, coming from a graphical user interface, password guidelines. I was so frustrated, I had to change my password and the guidelines weren't documented anywhere. So I was trying things out and it just said, wrong. And I tried a different thing and said, wrong. And so I had to try out everything that was possible, and in the end I had a password that works. You should make it really, really hard for your users to make mistakes like that. So put validation rules in the API definition or in your documentation if you don't have something Swagger-like to specify it. Very clearly state what is required, very clearly state what's not required. And another good point that's more API-specific, be tolerant when reading input. When someone gives you more input that you can handle, just ignore it. You don't have to tell them, hey, you gave me more than I need. Just say, thank you for giving me all the data. I'm going to throw it away. Which goes directly to the next point, minimalistic design. Don't put more stuff in your API that you need. Less is more. If you have so many things, it's going to be really, really difficult to understand and to read, and to focus on the things that you really need. Only ask for the data that you really require. Don't think about, oh, maybe one day someone might possibly. Just leave that out. If someone needs it, you can always put it in. That's not a problem. But in the beginning, keep it as small as you only can. Avoiding redundancies and using references. Think, for example, about... Can't come up with an example now. Products and categories. So you have products, and they fit into categories. One thing you can do is that whenever you specify a product, you say, and it belongs to the following category ID, the following category name, and the following category whatever. That's not really necessary, because you make people copy-paste things, and they will make mistakes. And you just don't need it. Reference instead of having users repeat. Yeah, help in documentation. Felix talked about that a lot. And it's a pain point from both sides. So people hate writing documentation and people hate reading documentation. So first of all, make it really easy for your developers, or for yourselves, probably in most cases, to write documentation. Use things like the concepts that Felix talked about. We do exactly the same. It works. And then make people read your documentation. Again, if you have a bad search, people try to find things, they won't. If you have just a pile of data and no good structure, people will not read it. If you make it super, super boring to read, or if it's full of errors and it's just completely wrong or outdated, again, people will not read your documentation. And you put a lot of work into that, and you have to think about who is your audience. Do they want to watch a video about how API calls works? Maybe. Then make a video for them. Do they want to have a... so I'm a big fan of this. You can write scripts, and you press play, and then it executes your API, and you can see what happens. That's the kind of documentation I like. Our users as well, turns out. And then the other two are, again, very technical things. Response codes are there for a reason. They are very, very good. If something is good, return 200 OK. If you created something, return 201 created. It's also, some of your users will not be people, some of your users will be machines. It's very, very useful for them if they get the correct response code. And if an error happens, explain what the error was. We establish a central catalog of everything that could possibly go wrong, and then we just reference it. We say, oh, something went wrong, click here for more information, you click and you get more information. Add hints about how to recover. Again, that password example. Your password was wrong. Please don't use special characters. Something like that. It's super helpful. My favorite rule, break the rules. Because sometimes they just don't make sense. It's very important to not take that as an excuse to, I'm just breaking the rules. First you have to know them, and then you have to know, does it make sense to follow the rule? Does it not make sense? Sometimes the standard is a bit odd, and sometimes it's a bit against usability. One example that we have is we have immutable data objects. So whenever you change it, you actually create a new object, and the other one just gets versioned and pushed somewhere in the background. For the user, he doesn't care whether it's immutable or not, or whether something was actually created or updated. For him, it is an update. Don't say 201 created, because you didn't create something, you changed it. REST says you created something. Oh yeah, and if you break them consistently. Don't just do whatever you want, because then again, your users will be super confused. And in the end, that's the most important thing. Never justify your designs. You might be right, yes, but that doesn't matter if your users don't like it, because then they won't use it, you won't get money, your product will be killed. Never justify your designs. It's tough. One thing that we established is that we try getting early customers of our APIs, and then we design the API together with them. So we say, hey, here's our suggestion. Have a look, say what you don't like, say what you like. Will this fulfill your use case like you imagine it? And then we change it and we collaborate. So yeah, quite often we spend a week or something to define an API, but then we know it's good and it's going to be liked. So to sum it up, good idea, make sure that people understand it. Consistency with the world and consistency internally, super, super important. Make sure that your users don't make errors just by making it really hard to make errors. Be forgiving, be friendly, and be very helpful with your documentation and your error messages. And never justify your design. The customer is always right. So those are the user principles, and the most important secret principle is it doesn't really help if you write them down, because then the wiki problem, talk about them. Whenever you work on an API, bring back those principles to your mind. Put it on posters. We actually did that. And then everything's going to be okay. Thank you very much.
Questions?
How do you make someone read the documentation? You had some examples, but making someone read, I never succeeded. How do you make someone read the documentation? I never succeeded with that. I can do whatever I want. They come to me and ask me, and they say, it's written down there. Oh, can I ask you?
Okay, I have the same. People come to me and ask me, I sometimes feel like living documentation of the company. I just don't reply, only with a link. And eventually they learn. So I'm being a very mean person here and just saying, I'm not going to talk to you, we wrote it down. Thank you.